I want you to picture a scene. It's December 9th, 2024. Cold day. We're on the street, and the tension is already dialed up to 11.
Because it's a police stop.
Exactly. It's a police stop. A black man has been stopped by the police. Now, usually, this is where the story splits into predictable narratives, but this one is different. The officer conducting the stop is also black.
And that detail is everything. It really is. It sets the stage for what should be, theoretically, a less volatile interaction. A moment where, a shared identity might just lower the temperature.
Right, you'd think so. So the man who was stopped, let's call him the defendant. He's trying to read the room. He's nervous. He wants to de-escalate.
Of course.
He wants to cut through that stiff, formal police versus civilian barrier. So he speaks to the officer as a peer. He uses a phrase that implies familiarity, something he probably says to his friends like 20 times a day. He looks at the officer and says, "Mein Gott."
And in that split second, the air just leaves the room. Instead of a handshake or a nod, that single phrase triggers a catastrophic chain reaction.
It really does.
Yeah.
He isn't just told to be quiet. He isn't just given a ticket. He is arrested for racially aggravated harassment.
Which is already, it's just a wild charge, given the context.
It gets worse. Because this guy was on license, what most of us would call parole. This arrest isn't just an inconvenience, it's a recall. He is sent back to prison.
Wow.
He loses his freedom for months. Months of his life just gone. Because he used a word to try and say, "We're cool."
But here's the turn, and this is why we're doing this deep dive. The case collapsed. The Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, they eventually offered no evidence.
They just dropped it.
They dropped it, and they dropped it because the defense didn't just argue, "Oh, he didn't mean it." No, they brought in heavy-hitter linguistic experts who essentially told the court, "You are fundamentally misinterpreting the code."
It's a fascinating case of the legal system just crashing into cultural reality.
Yeah.
But today, I don't want to just look at the law. I want to get into the psychology of it. We have this incredible stack of notes on something called the 6 Stages Framework, or SSF. And it's a tool. It's usually used for organizational psychology. But here, I think it explains a mystery. How can two men who share the same race, the same history, look at each other and see two completely different worlds?
It's the ultimate question of identity, isn't it? One man saw a bridge he could walk across. The other saw a line in the sand that had been crossed. We're going to unpack the danger of stage 0 naivety, the psychology of stage NISA 1 disassociation, and what happens when a zero-tolerance bureaucratic machine tries to process the messy nuance of human culture.
Let's start with that aha moment in the courtroom, because the linguistics here are actually really, really complex. I think most people hear that word and think, okay, it's a slur, end of story.
Right, case closed.
But the defense brought in Dr. Dominique Branson and Dr. Ian Cushing, and they argued it's just not that simple.
No, it's not. And we need to get a little technical for a second to understand why the CPS backed down. In linguistics, there's a massive difference between using a word referentially and using it vocatively.
Okay, break that down for us, referential versus vocative.
So if I use a word referentially, I'm describing you. I'm pinning a label on you. And if I use a slur referentially, I'm attacking your character or your identity.
Right.
But vocative use is different. It's an address. It's like saying, "Hey, you," or "my friend," or "dude." The experts argued that in Black British English and African American vernacular English, this specific term often functions entirely as a marker of group membership.
So it's a signal. It's like a password. It's saying, I recognize you. You're in my group.
Precisely. It signals solidarity. It signals, I am not a threat. And the smoking gun in this case, the thing that really proved the defendant's intent, was what happened immediately after the officer got angry.
Right, I saw this in the report. The officer challenges him, and the guy doesn't double down. He doesn't get aggressive.
No.
He immediately switches codes. He says, "My brother."
That switch is the key. My brother is the Rosetta Stone here. It proves that his goal, his entire mission in that conversation, was connection.
He was just grasping for a way to say, we are on the same side.
And when the first code failed, he tried a clearer one.
Which makes the arrest just so baffling. I mean, if someone says, "my brother," they are clearly not trying to racially harass you, so why did the officer react that way?
Wow.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. The officer's doing a job. He's in a public space. Someone uses a word that is objectively a racial slur in the dictionary. Does he have the luxury of parsing linguistic nuance? Isn't he just, enforcing the rules?
That is the million-dollar question. And this is where we have to bring in the 6 stages framework. Because to answer that, we have to understand that these two men were standing on the same pavement, but mentally, they were in two completely different caves.
I love this cave analogy. It sounds like Plato, but for modern identity politics.
It's very similar. The framework argues that we all operate from different psychological stages of identity. Let's look at the defendant first. The SSF would categorize his mindset in that moment as stage 0.
Stage 0. They call this naivety?
Naivety feels a bit judgmental, doesn't it? Like he's a child. Well, in this context, it refers to a specific blind spot. Misplaced solidarity. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're traveling in a remote part of Japan. You haven't heard English in weeks.
Okay.
Suddenly, you see someone walking down the street wearing a baseball cap from your tiny hometown high school.
Oh, I'd probably run up to them. I'd be like, no way, go Wildcats or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd assume we're practically best friends.
Exactly. You assume a shared cave. You assume that because you share this one specific marker, the hometown, you share a safety, a history, a language. That is stage 0.
So the defendant looked at the officer.
He saw the black skin and thought, safe. He gets it. He's one of us.
He thought the skin color was a VIP pass.
He thought proximity of race guaranteed solidarity of experience. And that was his error. He failed to read the gulf. He didn't realize that just because they look alike, it doesn't mean they're experiencing that moment in the same way.
So his use of the word wasn't an act of rebellion or aggression. It was a clumsy, maybe desperate attempt to build a bridge.
Clumsy is the perfect word. It was a clumsy attempt to say, I see you as a brother first and a cop second. But the problem is, the man he was talking to didn't see himself that way at all.
Which brings us to the officer. If the defendant is in stage 0, thinking we're all friends here, where's the officer?
The officer is operating from stage natural. The SSF calls this distancing or denial.
Okay.
So if the defendant is trying to pull them into a shared cave, the officer is standing firmly in a divided cave.
And the uniform is the wall.
It's more than a wall. It's a fortress. I mean, think about the pressure on that officer. He is working for an institution that has a historically, let's say, fraught relationship with the black community.
That's putting it mildly.
By making the arrest, the officer isn't just enforcing the law. He is performing a disassociation.
Disassociation from what? From the guy.
From the guy and from the code that the guy represents. The officer is signaling to the institution, to his superiors, maybe even to himself, you and I may both be black, but we are not the same. He needed to prove to the system that he was not comrades with the suspect.
That is incredibly heavy. It's like he has to punish the blackness, or at least this specific version of vernacular blackness, to protect his status in the cave of privilege, which is the police force.
You're hitting on the core friction point, and this brings us to the most uncomfortable concept in the sources. The idea that racism is power.
Right.
The officer had options. The sources call this the soft correction.
Right, because I was thinking about this. If I'm the officer and I'm offended, I could just say, hey, don't call me that. Keep it professional.
He could have whispered. He could have just set a boundary. Sir, I am an officer of the law. Please address me as such. That is a stage 1 response, setting a boundary while acknowledging the humanity of the other person.
But he didn't do that.
No, he chose harsh measures. Arrest, recall.
Yeah.
The SSF argues this wasn't about the word, it was about power. He used the full weight of the state to sever the tie the defendant tried to create.
He used the handcuffs to prove he wasn't a brother.
And that choice had devastating consequences. But, we can't just blame one officer. The sources make it very clear that the officer isn't a rogue agent. He's a product of a system.
This is where we get into the zero tolerance issue.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned earlier that the system creates this institutional blindness.
It does. Police training and legal systems in general, they love binary categories.
Yeah.
Guilty or innocent, safe or unsafe, slur or not slur.
It's like a basic computer code.
Yeah. It operates like, if keyword N-word is detected, then execute protocol, arrest.
It strips away all context. It doesn't care if you're hugging your best friend or shouting at an enemy. The machine just hears the word.
And that mechanical approach, it creates linguistic discrimination. It effectively criminalizes a natural way of speaking for a specific community. And the legal experts in our source material, they warn about a chilling effect.
What does that look like in practice? The chilling effect.
Well, it tells a young black man walking down the street, your natural way of speaking, the language you use to show love and solidarity in your own home, is a weapon in the eyes of the law.
It forces you to self-censor constantly.
Constantly. It tells you that to be safe, you must strip away your culture the moment you step outside.
Dr. Ian Cushing had a pretty intense quote about this in the notes. He said something like, anti-black linguistic racism is institutionally baked into the police.
It's a strong accusation, but look at the evidence. The system validated the officer's stage max 1 reaction. The CPS initially pushed the charge. The system didn't pause and ask, wait, was there intent to harass? It just saw the word and agreed with the officer. It validates the cave of privilege over the cave of identity.
Now, I want to pivot to something that I found really, really surprising. When I was reading through the notes on the aftermath of this case, specifically the debate that happened on LinkedIn and social media, I expected everyone to be on the defendant's side.
Right.
But that wasn't the case at all. The community itself is deeply divided on this.
It is, and we have to respect that complexity. There is no single black view on this word. The sources highlight a very strong argument from a man named and his take is, well, it's uncompromising.
He's the zero tolerance guy, right?
Yes, he argues that the word is offensive, period. He calls its use foolishness and backward vernacular. To him, the fact that it was meant as endearment is, and I'm quoting, no excuse.
I can almost hear my grandfather saying that. It feels like a generational divide, but it also feels like a survival strategy.
It's deeply rooted in what's called respectability politics.
Right.
The logic is, we have fought so hard to be respected. We have fought to be seen as professionals, as equals. Why are you dragging us back down by using the language of our oppression?
So for him, rejecting that word is a requirement for progress.
Absolutely. So when he sees the defendant using that word, he doesn't see culture. He sees someone letting the side down. He sees behavior that endangers the progress of the entire group.
He sees it as a liability.
Exactly. But then you have the counter-argument from people like Angela Bennett and Cyrus Tiz. And they flip the script entirely. They aren't looking at the word. They are looking at the handcuffs.
This is the racism is power argument again.
Yes. Bennett argues that the officer was out of touch. She says that focusing on the word ignores the real violence, which is the state taking away a man's freedom.
So the argument is, who cares if the word is improper? Does using a slang term justify being thrown in a cage?
Precisely. It's the David and Goliath dynamic. One guy has a badge, a radio, backup, and the power to lock you up. The other guy just has words. And Bennett is saying, Goliath, you are responsible for not crushing David just because he mumbled something you didn't like.
And sadly, this isn't an isolated incident. The sources point to a pattern of the UK legal system just struggling with this. There was the Coconuts trial.
Right, where a woman was prosecuted for a sign that was clearly political satire.
And the investigation into Professor Kehinding Andrews for using the term Hausengro, which was a historical and sociological critique.
In all those cases, the system acted like a spell checker. It saw a bad word and highlighted it in red, completely missing the sentence it was written in.
It misses the nuance. It misses the irony. It misses the cultural code.
And when the law misses the point, real people go to jail.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We have the case, the linguistic failure, the psychological stages, and this fierce community debate. What's the big takeaway here? If you're listening to this and you're trying to navigate a diverse world, what is the lesson?
I think the 6 stages framework teaches us something vital about human interaction, and it's this. Connection must be consensual.
Unpack that for me.
The defendant made a mistake. He assumed that because they shared a background, they shared a cave. He assumed an intimacy that hadn't been granted. You can't just force someone into your space of familiarity no matter how much you think they belong there.
That's fair. You can't just walk up to a stranger and act like your family, even if you look like family.
Right, but, and this is the huge, but the burden of response lies with the person with the power. And this is the provocative thought I want to leave with you, especially for anyone who manages people or teaches or polices.
The person in the uniform.
The person in the uniform or the suit or the manager's chair. When you encounter someone who clumsily tries to connect with you, maybe they use slang you don't like, maybe they make a joke that lands flat, maybe they assume a familiarity you didn't offer, what is your instinct?
Do you correct them or do you crush them?
Do you whisper quietly? Do you say, hey, not here, we don't do that? Do you use the soft correction? Or do you use harsh measures? Do you use your power to prove to the world that you are different from them?
Do you drop the hammer to prove you're not the nail?
That is the question, because the officer used the hammer. He proved his point. He proved he wasn't one of those guys. But the cost was another man's liberty. And the SSF asks, does the legal system, does society, have the right to put someone in prison just for misreading the room?
That is a terrifying thought. Because we all misread the room sometimes. We all make clumsy attempts at connection. If the penalty for social clumsiness is a prison cell, then none of us are safe.
Connection is risky business, and language is the minefield.
Well, that is a lot to process. We've gone from a street corner in London to the depths of psychological identity theory. It's been a heavy deep dive, but I think a really necessary one.
Absolutely. It makes you look at every interaction a little differently. Check your caves, everyone.
Indeed. Check your caves and maybe whisper before you shout. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you on the next one.